Hi everybody, today we're going to learn how to do a Veneziano dry mix. Now this seems to be the most difficult thing to do out of all of our plaster products, is to learn how to mix a dry mix Veneziano. Now the difference between our wet mix Veneziano and dry mix Veneziano is that our wet mix comes tinted and you can just open up and go. And the dry mix, all you have to do is add water and you'll get the same exact thing as our wet mix Veneziano. So today we're going to show you how to do it. So when you get your Veneziano plaster, it looks something like this. Inside you will find a strainer and sometimes a little bottle of tint, or a big bottle of tint, depending on what color you order. On larger orders, we sometimes put the strainers and everything else in a separate box. So here we go. Now, the first thing to remember is safety. Always wear gloves, always wear goggles, and a respirator. You don't want to get this stuff up your nose, and you don't want to get it in your eye, especially in your eyes. So when you first get the Veneziano, it's going to be a little bit stiff powder on top because it's been traveling and it got compacted a little bit. So with this tool, which is a 1/2-inch Milwaukee 7.5 amp whole hog, a Milwaukee whole hog, you're going to mix it up. And this is at 1200 RPM. The drill bit is 30 inches long, or you could use a drill bit like this, which is also 30 inches long. If you have something smaller and slower, you might want to do this in smaller quantities. And if you can, if you have a small speed mixer, you want to probably use hot water if you can. In this case, we're just using regular tap water from the sink, and it's cold. So we're going to loosen up the dry mix. Now it's a little bit easier. It's a little bit easier to pour out of the bucket. And what we have in here is a bucket full of water. It's about 10 quarts of water, or it goes up to about this circle on the warning label. And also on the side we have a little bucket of water with a quart, and also a stick to later scrape the Veneziano bucket walls on the side. So here we go. You pour in as much of the powder as you can. Now remember, wear a respirator. So if the drill is on a 1200 RPM setting, you don't want to hit the button really fast. You just want to slowly push it a couple of times, and you can see how it flops out. So be careful. So now you have this soupy mix. You want to take your stick and you want to scrape the walls down a little bit once. Like so. Mix it up a little bit. Again. Now we're going to put in the rest of the powder. And we're going to put a little bit of water on top, just about 1/4 of a quart, maybe about a cup's worth, just to have a little bit of water just on the top of here. And the reason we do that is because when the dry powder hits the mixed plaster, it might lump up a little bit. So this helps dissolve it a little. So there's still a little powder left inside, and we're going to get rid of that in a second. So you mix this stuff up. Scrape it again. A little bit more water on top. And dump in the rest of it. So right now it's a little bit on the thicker side, and you can notice that it just plopped up. So this is where you really need eye protection. I'm gonna put a little bit more water on top, about half a quart this time. Scrape it. Now keep in mind you can increase the amount of water that you have, and that's if you're doing maybe a light color, or if you're going to put it through a sprayer, or if you're going to roll it on, you might want to keep it a little bit thin. But if you want to use it within the next day or two, this is about the amount of water that you'll need. I'm going to put a little bit more water in there just so it's a little bit easier to mix. Now at this point you might see that it's a little bit clumpy. I have all kinds of little bits and pieces on top. And I'm going to mix for a couple of minutes until most of it's gone, or I feel it's nice and creamy enough to put through a strainer, which will be the next step. Keep in mind too that even if it is a little bit thin and it doesn't look like it's very usable right now, it will stiffen up within the next couple of hours or even the next couple of days. So if you put too much water and it's just too soupy, just give it some time until eventually it'll be nice and thick and creamy, and it's going to be very easy to trowel. I'm going to add even a little bit more water in there just because I want to demonstrate the straining, and if it's a little bit thinner, it's a little easier to strain. Every once in a while, stop mixing and let the air out. So that looks pretty good right now. So we put the mixture to the side. We take our empty bucket, make sure it's free of any dust or extra dry plaster. We're going to get our strainer. I'm going to wrap it around the inside of our bucket. And then we're going to pour about half of the plaster into the bucket and see what happens. So we have about half the wet plaster inside the bucket with the strainer. And now what we're going to do is pick up the side of the strainer and strain it like so. Just toss it side to side a little bit. Most of it has already gone through. So now you get this bit of a ball, and you can squeeze it ever so gently into the bucket. Put the strainer back on. Pour in the rest of the plaster. You might want to use a more efficient tool of getting all the wet plaster out of the bucket. In this case, we'll just use our gloves. All right, we pretty much got all of it out. Take our strainer again. Squeeze it through a little bit. If you have too many clumps and you can't get anything out, turn the back to the side where there's a cleaner area of the strainer. Squeeze it through a little bit. And that's it. Now you have a perfect Veneziano wet mix. It's soupy right now, but in a couple of hours, or even in a couple of days, it'll look like this. Very easy to trowel and has a nice perfect thickness to it, which makes it much easier to go across the wall. So, the moment you do this, and wipe down the sides a little bit, pour a little bit of water on top so the top doesn't crust up. And that's how you do a Veneziano wet mix. Now, the other thing to remember is that we got this little bit of tint that came in the bucket. So, open it up, take it out, shake it up a little bit. Since we just poured this water in, we could remove it. And you can put the tint in anytime. Just remember that if you are using a lot of colorant, it's going to make you a very thin mix, which is going to be very difficult to trowel. So if you're going to have a deep red or a deep blue or something like that, you might want to consider trying to make the Veneziano as thick as possible. Straining it might be a little difficult, but it's going to be much easier on your trowel later on. So again, we have the tint. We'll just dump it in like so. Put the drill back in there. Scrape it, just to get all the white plaster from the side. And this way you have is it. Again, preferably with a sponge. You might want to clean it like so. Get rid of any stuff on the side. Pour a little bit of water in there. And cover it up. And that's all you have to do. Kiss me goodnight. Kiss me goodnight.